In the province of dream time, there are no limits. The mind is infinite. Communication. Dream time. In the province of the mind, what one believes to be true either is true or becomes true within certain limits.
Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and on this program I like to investigate the nature of reality. And if you've been following the program, you know that over the past few weeks I've investigated what we've been called the UFO phenomena, ETs, and the whole abduction experience, and are they real? And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people in the field, and two of the most recent interviews I've done have been with expert researcher Budd Hopkins, and I would say an expert experiencer, someone who's had phenomenal encounters, conscious waking encounters with other intelligences. There's many of you who think that maybe this stuff is too far out, maybe it's not real, but there's a whole subculture emerging where this is very real, and this is becoming part of a whole increasing level of what's possible in the world. And as more people, I feel, accept this, then we can start to include this into a more popular culture. So these programs are about integrating an alternative point of view into something that's more possible, more available. So on this program that you'll be seeing tonight, I've woven together two separate interviews, one that I did with Budd Hopkins, the author of Intruders, Witnessed, and Missing Time, which was the first book that really came out that exposed all this. And the interview I've woven this together with was one with an experiencer from the John Mack research group in Boston, Pier, and she talks about her experiences. So I've tried to create one where we have a context for the research and then the actual experience itself. So stay tuned and be ready for the incredible.
Well, I think just to put the thing in perspective, which is kind of important.
Yes.
You can look at the UFO phenomenon as having developed this way. We saw these things flying around. We originally thought they were military, they were American or Russian or something. It took a while before people began to think, Lord, are they extraterrestrial?
Yeah.
Then that got accepted. But nobody wanted to think there was anybody in them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just machines or something. Because it's a little too scary to imagine people, beings inside these things. And the point I'm essentially trying to make here is how conservative we've been and how we viewed this. But ultimately, we started getting occupant reports.
Right.
Okay, we finally decided maybe there are little people in there, but they're leaving us alone. They're just looking. Again, we're trying to keep this as tight and narrow as possible. So eventually, the Betty Barney Hill case breaks. 1966 came to light. These people were picked up. What did we think about that? Well, many people said that I just can't accept that. But those who did accept it said, well, maybe this one unlucky couple happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're leaving everybody else alone. They only picked these two up. Then we started getting a few more cases. And then it begins to seem, there's more to this, and maybe it's happening a little more often. Well, when I got into this in 1975, we knew about 10 or 12 abduction reports that were taken seriously that investigators were looking into. Many people still who were accepting the reality of UFOs would not accept abductions, even so. At any rate, in 75, we knew about a few. When I started doing my work, one of the most dramatic things that I discovered was through one case and then other cases following. A man remembered driving home at night, couldn't remember anything happening at all, but he felt very scared about the whole thing. Scared about what? He had no idea.
Right.
he then became terrified every time he passed through a certain stretch of highway, as if something had happened to him during that stretch. What was it? He had no idea. He eventually began to feel it had to do with a UFO. We looked into it. We used hypnotic regression. A psychologist who was a skeptic on the whole thing, out came a full-blown abduction. Now, what that told me was anybody could have been abducted.
I was very right-minded, voted to the right, listened to Rush Limbaugh, very disconnected from any sense of community or a concept of what is a whole consciousness. I was pretty much just into being married and having a pretty normal life. And since then,
one day something happened that shook you and woke you up.
Yeah, and it happened over the course of about 2.5 or 3 years. A series of really intense experiences, sometimes three times a week.
3 times a week. Starting what year?
In '96, spring of '96.
Something happened where, can you just tell us a little
Sure,
bit?
the first experience that I was conscious of began with a blue light coming through a window, which after that point I immediately fell asleep, only then to reawaken in the middle of what is now commonly understood to be a pretty classic experience with beings that everybody's pretty familiar with by now.
Now, did you freak out when you looked up and these beings were standing?
Freaking out is the understatement of the century.
Okay.
Completely terrified, pull me off the ceiling, out of my skin, everything else.
Right, because
Yeah.
it's totally against anything we can possibly
Completely.
conceive.
Completely. It was outrageous. And I was never interested in the subject whatsoever. Hadn't heard of abduction, didn't know who John Mack was, Whitley Strieber was, didn't even know it was even possible.
Right.
So I was out of my head.
So then you kept having these experiences, and as they kept progressing, did you become more comfortable with them?
I would say that there was always the element of fear at the beginning of each experience, and maybe comfortable in the sense that I could always count on the fact that I would be afraid, and that would then transition as the experience continued.
I mean, as the experience started, you say, "Oh no, it's happening again."
Yeah, only a lot louder and a lot scarier way than like that.
But there was never anyone around.
Right. Or I was living with my fiance at the time, so he was often accompanying me in bed.
Did he accept what was happening to you?
No, he had a really hard time with it, and he gradually learned to sort of grow and open with it a little bit when he realized I wasn't going to go completely off the deep end with it, but he was very, very, very concerned initially.
So 3 nights a week, you were having visitors.
Right.
To show you the conservatism of the community of investigators who took this seriously, there used to be a time where if somebody reported 2 sightings, they were automatically thrown out on the ground that sightings had to be so rare that anybody has it happen twice means he's making it up.
Right.
So now we're getting abductions, several in the same person over a period of time. So I began looking into that. I found out that this was an ongoing, in-depth study of that individual.
And in their family.
And in their family.
Right.
That discovery followed that. Well, now, these were all new thoughts. The investigators thought, my Lord, where are the edges of this thing? Then I discovered that there were certain wounds that people frequently had that formed certain patterns. What we're looking for here are patterns, because there are similarly thousands of patterns that never happen.
Right.
Which is very important, because if you're dealing with imagination, it's going to be all over the place.
That's right, and the patterns are particularly where these abductions occur, what parts of the body.
What parts of the body and so forth, right. So nobody really had an idea of what this was leading to. Why were they doing this? And why were there these sort of physical procedures?
And sometimes they're very, very physical, in the very real sense that we describe physical or real. And other moments they were out-of-body experiences that included more teaching things and metaphoric things. The physical experiences had a lot more to do with physical interactions with the beings and procedures related to reproduction and that sort of thing.
Well, then I stumbled into one case after another that had to do with what seemed like the removal of ova from women, and then an artificial insemination procedure, and production of small hybrid children.
And sperm from males.
And sperm from men, exactly. And suddenly the thing made tremendous sense. If this is happening, then obviously they're going to have to go back to the same people again and again. If this is a genetic experiment, you're going to deal with generations in the family.
Each generation is like
yes.
preparing soil to
yes,
be
exactly. Well,
how
does somebody practicing agronomy go about producing a new strand of corn?
Right.
You have to go through, generation after generation. Breeding that's the way breeding operates. So that would then give the UFO occupants a reason to be hanging around and doing this and doing it covertly for a long time.
Right.
If they're going to have to, instead of just picking up here and there some odd person, that they're going to have to follow somebody and go with that person through his or her development. Physically.
So that was the next phase, the fact that you found that these individuals were being
right.
followed.
And of course that became absolutely crucial to the whole understanding of the abduction phenomenon, because now you have a motive, you have a rationale for all these various procedures that they're doing.
The motive being they were creating a genetic
a genetic mix, a hybrid mix, exactly. Now, why are they creating the hybrid mix? That is a question we can only speculate about because we really don't know. We can take that from many different points of view as in speculation. One is, take the diarist, are they going to infiltrate and surreptitiously and take over the planet? Certainly possible. Number two is they're going to get what they need in this created artificial hybrid species and leave and populate some planet somewhere else with it.
Right.
That's another end. There could be some kind of more overt contact where we begin to share and etc., which is the nicer way to think about it.
Yes.
I don't really know, and nobody does know.
Yes, I believe the hybrid project is something that is very important potentially to both races. My understanding is that it's being done because their bodies are no longer very suitable for them, that they're very ill, that they can no longer naturally reproduce, and it's potentially beneficial for us because if we ever happen to significantly eradicate ourselves, then there's something of a sort of a life insurance policy. But that's sort of more of an impression of information. I'm not willing to take any of that to the bank because it's in a pretty obscure place for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're actually going to share our world with these hybrid children that will be a sort of intersecting point between the two cultures. I mean, other people have said that too.
That idea has been introduced to me, but I think I remain a fierce skeptic of even my own experiences. And people have been preaching dates, of the end of the world or seeing things for thousands of years. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily an end of the world sort of thing, but it certainly is fairly surreal to most of us.
Well, the whole thing is surreal.
Right.
I mean, the whole idea.
So for me to even go to the place where it's, that there's a possibility that these beings that may or may not exist in this density, which in my opinion, my feeling is that they don't exist in a purely three-dimensional sense.
Like me and you, they're not solid.
Yeah, a higher, finer vibration.
Right.
So it would be difficult, in my understanding or in my imagination, for them to exist in the frequency as we exist in this dimension now.
Right.
So I'm highly skeptical on how these two worlds can kind of be married, or if it'll be married even in this lifetime.
Right.
I'm not, maybe, but I don't know.
All the way through this,
Yeah.
when you go back and read, starting back in 47, 48, 49, the beginning, every year it was announced by somebody, this is the year, it's going to happen, it's going to break, it's going to, they're going to land, we're going to have contact. And one of the abductees who I know well and have enormous respect for has had this kind of vision, Charles Hickson. And Charles Hickson was abducted with Calvin Parker back in 1973. in Pascagoula, Mississippi, when they were fishing. It was the second abduction case to make the headlines, really. And Charlie was told the date, and they're going to come. He has spent years.
What was that date?
1996.
Oh.
So the problem is that we have this. The feeling is there that we're getting close to something popping, but it's been that way for a long time. So I tend to not prognosticate. I don't really know. But one of the things about this, of course, is that the UFO occupants have constantly done things that I think are sort of like psychological tests to see how we react or respond emotionally. Right. And one of them might just be, let's tell this man that it's all going to happen in 1996 and see what he does about it.
And the fact that what I've heard is that these species, whoever they are, want the emotions that humans have because
Absolutely.
They become pure intellect, and we can offer them something.
Exactly. One of the things that absolutely emerges in the way people feel that the aliens respond to them and how these encounters take place is that they feel that the UFO occupants are hungry for something human that we have that they lack. And I've thought one of the most touching things about this is the fact that over and over again we get reports where a woman is abducted who has had a fetus removed, apparently. She's taken back to the craft and is shown a little baby, and she is made to feel it's partly hers, which maybe it is, and she is asked to bond with it, to hold it. And the aliens are very intensely watching the process as she holds the baby, as if they believe that humanity contains some kind of magic human touch connected perhaps with our spirituality or our love that they don't have, that they want to see, they need, and they feel that these children seem to need it. And there used to be, of course, back in the old contactee days when there were all these people announcing how they'd taken wonderful flying saucer trips to Venus and so forth, that the aliens were here to teach us that we must make love, not war, ban the bomb, take care of the environment, all the sort of obvious cliche things. And that somehow they're the wise beings who are here to help us. But actually, when you study the accounts of what happens in these abductions, it's as if the aliens are hungry for something we have that perhaps they have eliminated through an evolution that's gone cold, so to speak.
No, that's very touching because it's as if we're suddenly being recognized for our humanity.
Exactly.
Well, I think for me, about 7 months into it, I finally decided, or realized I had to accept what was happening because I had an extremely conscious experience, not even sort of kind of subtly out of it, very, very conscious and awake, like we're talking with each other. And at that point,
what was that experience?
I had gone to bed to go to sleep and was awakened by a tickle on the back of my head. And within minutes, I was paralyzed, but still awake, and felt a being or something step on the end of the bed, and then couldn't move as it slowly made its way up either side of my body as I was laying down. And it finally stopped and paused with one knee on my chest and one hand on either side of my head, and then finally said, "Okay, you can open your eyes." And when I was allowed to do that in waking consciousness, like you and I are speaking, I saw this thing in front of my face, about 2 inches in front of my face, and I could see my room, and everything was normal and real and very awake. And it was at that point that, along with other physically corroborative evidence, that I just couldn't deny it anymore.
So this ET thing, classical?
Very, very insect looking, though, more so than the typical gray. I mean, there's a certain softness to the grays, at least in my explanation of them or my vision of them. And with this thing, it looked almost biomechanical in its matrix, and sort of a grayish black sort of look to it. Looked like it had a big wasp head on it, black wraparound eyes, too skinny neck, segmented, skinny arms, segmented, little light body, maybe about 15 pounds or so.
And it was communicating with you telepathically?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you freaked out at first?
Completely, hyperventilating. Absolutely.
And then it just stayed there with you?
Well, it stayed there long enough for me to be aware that it was there and without passing out. And then it sort of shifted its consciousness, and what I felt like he did was sort of did this download, 90 million miles an hour of a bunch of information that I couldn't even begin to process because it was happening so quickly. And then just as soon as I thought I probably couldn't stand that anymore, it stopped, and then it uploaded. And so then I saw these images of my own life and my own experiences sort of flash before my eyes really, really rapidly. And as soon as that stopped, I began to feel my body vibrate really, really hard. And then I began to go into shifted consciousness, and a different kind of experience happened beyond that. But for the first 3 or 4 minutes of the experience with that thing on my bed and on me, I was full blown awake.
Do you think you are genetically, physically a different person because of that experience?
I wouldn't say genetically a different person because of the experience. I would say that I feel like I am different because of all of the experiences that I've had, and my body feels like it's functioning at a different frequency than what it used to.
What kind of information did this being download into you?
Well, a lot of it was happening very quickly, but what I could tell was colors and geometric shapes and ideas of physics and stuff like that.
You see what's interesting? They're not here because they're interested in our atomic weapons, our computers, our closed circuit television, or whatever, you name it. They have no interest in our technology or our warfare or anything like that. What do they care about? The way we hold babies, the way we make love to one another's sexuality, the way we care for each other, the way I think that we're different one from another. They seem to be so uniformly out of the
kind
same
of a group mind, and we have the
Exactly.
individual mind. Actually, when you talked about the tickle part, I had an experience where in abduction, or that I felt this tickle up the inside of my thigh, and they were running something up there. And then this gets into this other question. They placed this little being in my hand, this little. It didn't look like a human. It looked like a little deer, big black eyes and sort of a cut-off snout. And I didn't have any emotional connection to that being. So it was just like more shock, like, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
I mean, not fear, just like, oh, what do I do with this? Right. And then I must have woken up or something.
The thing there, Alan, that's so fascinating is the range of reaction that you get from people who were asked to hold the babies. One woman said she was about to throw the child down like that, and they took it away from her quickly. They obviously could read it. She was disgusted with it. Another woman was handed a baby that was very distorted, and it was really the beginning of what for her was a dread of looking at children, looking at babies. Other women have been totally, and men have been totally involved with this, but it's as various as we are as human beings. And at this point, just in some extremely bizarre cases, we have situations where people will feel they're seeing their hybrids or other hybrids in the real world, dealing with them right here and now, breathing our air and so forth. As if there already is some kind of coexistence going on. And there are too many cases here to look askance at that. We don't know what this means. Do they go in and get a social security card? Well, I don't know what happens.
But something's definitely happened to you.
Yes.
And that's real, and that you said you felt an increase in your vibration.
Very definitely so.
So these earth bodies are somehow, or at least yours and other people's, are accelerating its frequency.
Yeah.
And hopefully, this is what I surmise or guess would be that we're trying to meet them at the level they exist.
I would hope so.
And I think it's very exciting. I mean,
you're way more positive about it than I am.
What's not exciting that we're going to share the universe with these galactic
it would be great if that was actually going to happen. If we knew it was going to happen.
It's happening. We're doing it. You're doing it. No, you're doing it.
Kind of, in some capacity, in a very vague capacity that I cannot reproduce in any kind of laboratory. I cannot reproduce in a group setting. It's an extremely anecdotal experience. And so for me, it still remains in the other. And I understand why the experience exists like that. and what benefits can come from being just the carrot just beyond reach that I always have to keep reaching toward. But
what you have to ask is really how these people have been changed by the experiences, what's been going on in their lives. And you have across the gamut, the range of people, a gamut of reactions. Everything from, I have 3 cases where, although I didn't know the people involved, but I knew subsequently the family members, that there were 3 suicides.
Oh, really?
Because the people were so terrified of what happened. I have had people who became drug addicts, alcohol dependent, people who have blown themselves up with, people who have been extremely frightened, neurotic, all kinds of problems. People who have done a lot better. People who have done very well indeed.
But you know what I got from you is that something was encoded into you. I mean, just, and that if you got out of the way, this personality and all the dramas and all the stuff.
Ego.
Well, it's not just the ego. It's a sort of attitude about who you are in relationship to the experience. If you could just remove that, I think you could bring through some great information and message. And
Potentially, but I live in a world that so much doesn't support that.
Well, choose your friends more carefully. You can live in a world that does support that. I mean,
Sure, but then I feel like then that separates me from the majority of the rest of my culture. And I could, we were speaking about this morning, I could go off into a community, a very small community that supports these kind of experiences. I could begin to channel all these different entities, which is something that's sort of a side effect of this. I could draw great, sort of interdimensional drawings and make great interdimensional music and live happily ever.
Let's do it.
Except then there's the whole rest of the world and the culture that's not having this experience.
Is there anything that, if you can just tap into that state and that connection to that consciousness, that you can really just deliver?
If we can choose to react to situations with a little more patience, with a lot more compassion, and maybe even from a place of love, then our external world might begin to reflect the internal changes.